Today I wanted to talk about Top Gun, the story, the 1986 movie, not the second new one, Maverick, but this is the original one, starring Tom Cruise as our favorite Maverick, and I absolutely loved it. It's a fantastic story, great action, good characters, and hit all the points that you need in order to draw the audience into the story. And especially recently, because I've been watching Rings of Power, I really couldn't help but do a comparison between Maverick as a character and Galadriel. And I'm not going to talk too much about Rings of Power in this one, mostly about Top Gun, but I did want to just do a short, keep this in mind in terms of that. So if you're not familiar with Rings of Power, Galadriel is very much a stand-off character. She's not really close with anyone. She's fairly abrasive, brash, and arrogant, I think is what most people would call her as from there. So just keep that in mind, and we'll go into a little bit more details. But I wanted to essentially highlight on this question of why does the character of Maverick work? Because he is arguably all of these things that Galadriel is, but it doesn't seem to work with her. You know, what's at play here? And I don't really believe at all it's had anything to do with sexism or, women characters or anything like that. Generally, it's the tried and tested and true answer of bad writing is at fault. Usually it's always bad writing, and turns out again it is bad writing from there. So what I wanted to do is just kind of show you something and talk about it in a little bit more detail.
Excuse me, Lieutenant. Is there something wrong?
Yes, ma'am. The data on the MiG is inaccurate.
How's that, Lieutenant?
Well, I just happened to see a MiG-28 Sorry, Goose. We happened to see a MiG-28 do a 4G negative dive.
Where did you see this?
That's classified.
It's what?
It's classified? I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Lieutenant, I have top secret clearance. The Pentagon sees to it that I know more than you.
Oh, ma'am, it doesn't seem so in this case now, does it?
So, Lieutenant, where exactly were you?
Well, thank you, started up on his 6 when he pulled through the clouds, and then I moved in above him.
Well, if you were directly above him, how could you see him?
Because I was inverted.
Bullshit. No, he was, man. It was a really great move. She was inverted.
You were in a 4G inverted dive with a MiG-28?
Yes, ma'am.
At what range?
No, about 2 meters.
Well, it's actually about 1.5, I think. It was 1.5. I've got a great Polaroid of it, and he's right there. Must be 1.5.
It was a nice picture. It wasn't half.
Thanks.
Lieutenant, what were you doing there?
Communicating.
Keeping up foreign relations. I was, giving him the bird.
You know, the finger.
Yes, I know the finger, Goose.
I'm sorry. I hate it when it does that. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
So you're the one.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, gentlemen, we have a hop to take. The hard deck on this hop will be 10,000 feet. There'll be no engagement below that.
All right, so for this scene, after watching that scene, we kind of get an interesting introduction, because if you're familiar with the story, then you know this is not the beginning of the movie. This is probably, I think it's like 20-30 minutes in to the story. So it's a little bit unfair to show you something when we have, the story organized itself for a reason, and understandably so. But imagine if this was the first scene that you came across. You have the character Maverick, who's played by Tom Cruise. He's chewing gum. He's got this very smirky smile. He's kind of, this "I told you so" from there. He, corrects the teacher. Actually, teacher, you're incorrect from there. I will say it is absolutely really funny scene there's no E there, with Goose, where he corrects it from I to we, and Goose goes, thank you. Thank you. He's like, oh, no problem. He's just all magnanimous. And you really get a good understanding of their dynamic from the scene as well, where this is kind of ride or die sort of thing where Goose is with Maverick no matter what, even in his antics, even if into his arrogant antics or anything like that. Like, he's with them all the way 100%, which is a great character moment from there. So what we've got is we've got this really arrogant character that's we're supposed to care about them. We're supposed to understand where they're coming from, understand their point of view from there. They're supposed to align. We're supposed to root for him to achieve his hopes and dreams, And usually when you have a character this arrogant, you're not really rooting for them. In fact, you want them to fall down. You want them to crash and burn. So how does the story do this? And this is where we're going to go back to the actual beginning of the story and go into a little bit more detail on from there. All right, so the story begins with two fighter planes going on a mission, going on a routine patrol. And so the first fighter plane is piloted by our heroes, Maverick and Goose. So we've got, on the first one, we've got Mav and Goose. And the second is by Cougar and I don't know, someone else. Cougar, a guy named Cougar. And they all go by these things called call signs, which apparently, according to Reddit, is usually they're nowhere near as cool. They're always super embarrassing, related to some embarrassing story, and that's what it becomes usually. Except for Obi-Wan's brother, who apparently his call sign is Obi-2, which is great. So there you go. There's your Reddit trivia from there. So they're doing a routine patrol, just flying around from here, kind of looking at different stuff and kind of just routine patrol from here. And they come across two bogies, two unidentified other fighters. These are fighters, presumably the enemy. They are in neutral airspace and given orders, don't fire unless fired upon, so you can't fight them or anything like that. And they're on the similar orders from there. And so what we end up seeing is Maverick ends up sneaking up behind one of the planes. They're flying around, they're like dodging and twisting and turning and all this stuff and everything like that. But Maverick has one in his sights and gets fully locked on. It has a little screen where and then it goes green. From there, he's got it locked on. And what that means, but he doesn't fire. What it means is that him and the other fighter know that he could have killed him from there. Because once you're locked on, that means you can fire the missiles, and it's really, really difficult to dodge the missiles. So likely as not, you're completely dead. And then Maverick goes up and flies and flips upside down. All right, and so what we've got here is this is the enemy plane. They fly upside down right on top of them, so they're both flying, gazillion miles per hour this way. And Maverick and Goose fly up and around them, and Mav gives them the bird, and Goose gets a Polaroid of the enemy and then flies off. And it's the ultimate, F you sort of deal. We not only beat you in terms of flying, but we've done this, this whole game and everything like that. But then lo and behold, it turns out that Cougar, the other plane from here, has a guy on him and he's constantly behind him. So what it means is there's, a fighter pilot that's running along, flying along, and then there's another one right behind him, and he can't shake him. That one scene from Star Wars. Can't shake him. And they're flying along, and they've got the lock on him. He's got him locked on. So at some point, during the chase, he's got him locked on, gets the green check mark, which tells Cougar that the other guy could have killed him. And this completely just zonks Cougar out. He completely, he loses his cool. He's sweating profusely. He's looking down at the photo. There's a photo in his cockpit, and it has, wife and child from here. And he's looking at that, and we instantly understand what is going on. He's understanding that he could have just lost his wife, never gone home. His kid would have been, grown up without a dad. All of this stuff is going through his head, which is going through our head, and we completely understand what's going on. He can't shake him, and Maverick is out of it, and he stops responding, which, as you may have guessed, when you're flying a fighter plane gazillion miles per hour, is a bad deal. So he stops communicating with the aircraft carrier, he stops communicating with his partner, he starts co-pilot, he stops communicating with Maverick and everything like that, and they're ordered to return back. So they do at least turn around and go back, but after he's turned, that's when Cougar stops responding. And so they're going to land at the aircraft carrier. These carriers are like this, and they always have very steep like this. They always look very thin in my mind. And then you got this control tower thing like this, and then they have one of these tower things like that, and then they have the radar thing that spins around a whole lot. But essentially they've got this deck, and then this is where the planes come and land, and then this is where they get catapulted and taken off from here. So Cougar, what happens is Maverick is realizing they keep yelling at Cougar, trying to get him to respond. And what happens is Maverick starts getting close to land. He's about to land, then he flies off. His commanding officer starts swearing at him, and he goes up and flies up beside Cougar. So they're right beside each other. It's plane to plane from here. And he does this, and so he can get a one-to-one look at Cougar and kind of look at him in the eyes and try and snap him out of it, so that they're right next to each other, flying, a gazillion miles per hour. So he can talk to him and finally try and get some sense in him, because otherwise he's going to die. He is going to die. His kid is going to grow up without a dad. And he finally is able to get him to snap out of it, and then they both land, and then everything is successful, and he made it from there. Cougar goes the next day or later that day, Cougar goes into his commanding officer and resigns. He's like, I can't do this anymore. I've lost my edge from there. I can't do this anymore, because you're starting to realize to be a fighter pilot, you have to have this overwhelming confidence. You can't really doubt yourself. You're running 100% on, instinct from here. This is not something that you can really just kind of fluff around or anything like that. What you have to do is you just have to go with it. You have to go with your gut. You have to trust your gut. You have to trust your wingman, trust your pilot, trust the system, trust your ship, and go with it, because you guys are going so fast up in the air. You're just about ready to completely fall apart. And so Cougar resigns, and what this means, though, is the commander then pulls Maverick in and chews him out for disobeying orders, not for returning when he was ordered to, and instead trying to go back and save Cougar. He's like, you disobeyed an order, you did a brave thing and saved somebody's life, but you disobeyed an order. But since there's a spot opened up, because Cougar was number 1 and you guys were number 2, it turns out you guys are going to the school, the Naval School for Fighter Pilots, Top Gun. You guys are going to Top Gun from there. And so they're super pumped because they get to go to the school, and they're kind of going from there. And so this is kind of our beginning introduction to Maverick and Goose as characters, as a team, and everything like that. And you really do get a good understanding of it. So Maverick is reckless. He is quite reckless in terms of what he's doing and all of his actions from here. However, despite his recklessness, he goes out of his way to save his team, save his partner, save his wingman. And so what happens then from there? You kind of get a better idea of, while this reckless and this arrogance and something like that, there is a person behind that. While he is highly competent and competitive, he will risk his own life to save his wingman. And this is something where, again, kind of thinking of Galadriel, comparing these two arrogant characters. She's ready to sacrifice her entire elf team in order to go into this icy, wintry, blizzard wilderness. She doesn't have this balancing act where she is, arrogant and anything like that, but she really does care. She's just arrogant. We don't really get the understanding that she cares. Bam. And it's just like, you need something to counterweight it. It would be another thing. I remember I was watching the pitch meeting guy who does skits, and he was doing, and what the whole idea behind this is where it's somebody who's pitching the show, and he's doing it after the show's already run, and so he's highlighting all the flaws and anything like that. And the guy is just like pitching is like, oh. And so what we've got here is we've got Galadriel, the highly competent 1,000-year-old warrior who then, she leads her men into a suicide mission against Sauron? Yes, absolutely. Isn't she supposed to be 1,000 years old? Isn't she supposed to be wiser than all of them? And it's like, yes, how do you explain that? We don't. Okay, moving on. And it's just kind of highlighting this whole aspect of it. You don't have this balancing act for Galadriel like you do for Maverick. The other thing is, for this scene that we watched, that we were looking at, that's farther into the story. We do get this whole scene of, the carrier, the fighter pilots, the bird. We get this whole scene to like Maverick more. So when he is just arrogant, we know that there is actually something more behind it, which is not, which we don't get from there. And then, they're there and they're in class. They arrive at Top Gun. They're in class, and they're the Viper, call sign Viper is there. And he's kind of going through the whole spiel talking about, strategy and tactics and everything like this from there. And so what it is and Maverick is sitting in the front and he's chewing gum and everything like that. And they're talking about, the best of the class. So this is the top of the class. So basically 1% gets to go to Top Gun, and then the best of those get their name on the plaque and go up forever immortalized. And so both Maverick and Goose are like, we're aiming for that from there. And the teacher kind of looks at Maverick and gives him a call out from here, and it's just like, you think your name will be going up there? And he's like, yep, yes sir. And he's like, you're pretty arrogant. And Maverick just goes, yep. And what you understand then from here is that, again, this is the idea of this confidence and almost, arrogance is necessary to be a fighter pilot, in terms of, because you are acting on perfect initiative, instinct from here. You have to have the confidence to be able to back this up. Otherwise, you're going to turn into cougar, which, again, nothing against cougar. I'm a cougar. I could not be a fighter pilot by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to leave my wife and kids. I would have lost my edge immediately, because I'm like, I'd rather go home. Thank you very much. From there. And that's what you have to work with. And so this is what is going on with the character. And so then what happens next in the story, they go to this bar and they're doing this, making bets. Maverick's trying to make moves on a girl, and he sees this, beautiful blonde woman sitting up at the bar. She's possibly waiting for someone, something like that. Maverick goes on there and they do this whole song, and everybody kind of joins in for this wingman. Song to try and woo her, and it doesn't work. She shoots him down. But also in the class and in the bar, we're introduced to the rivals. These are the characters. Probably the most one of the famous parts about this is the rivalry with them and Iceman and his co-pilot person, Slider, from there. And Iceman is called Iceman because he never makes mistakes. He's calm and collected, and he will just wait for you to make mistakes, and he never makes mistakes himself. He's this calm, and he's smug. He's got this same arrogance that Maverick has, and they're just headbutting because these guys, Iceman and Slider, are currently the top of the class. They're aiming for they're going to be the best. They're like, we're going to be the best. You're not going to be the best. And so you have this rivalry going on. So we have this whole aspect and understand all of this from here. And Maverick goes back after getting shot down. He goes to try again with the blonde woman, and again gets shot down. And later that day in class, what we see, who do we see walk up from here, as a woman, and this, she's got the heels and everything like that, and all this stuff is a civilian, call sign Charlie, and it turns out that's short for Charlotte, I believe. And from there you have, turns out it is the blonde woman from the bar the night before. It turns out she is a civilian contractor with the Pentagon very high up and knows her stuff and knows who Maverick is, knows he's a student, knows he's a fighter pilot, everything from there. She fully knows him from there. And this is where we come in to this scene. This is the whole backstory for this scene. So we understand the dynamic. We understand the dynamic between Goose and Maverick, where Maverick's like, I, and Goose is, no, we. And then, Maverick continues telling the story and says, we. And, Goose is like, oh, thank you. We would like to thank you for your recognition from here. And you understand the context of that whole day from there. You understand the need for Maverick, the reason why Maverick is so arrogant. You understand all of this. There's backstory to all of these characters. We also see that, Iceman is calling BS from here, but no, turns out they're correct. And this woman who tried to, she's kind of throwing it in Maverick's face and he's throwing it right back. They have this energy, there's this sexual tension going on because they're flirting while also trying to best each other in this public arena, and they're pretending not to know who the other is. And you have this whole dynamic coming into play. And so this is what we've got. This is kind of the whole dynamic that is building up to the scene. This is what Galadriel doesn't have in Rings. This is, you don't even take necessarily Galadriel. Take any of these arrogant characters or anything like that you find so dislikable, and figure out, you can see what is going on to make them so dislikable. What are they missing? Because this is what Top Gun for Maverick has. This is what he has going into this to be able to make sure this character can pull us through to the end of the story from there. So, but yeah, that's all I've got. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next.